That's Elvis. Here we go.
75 people.
Hello, hello. Everyone's making their way in. Keep them coming, keep them coming. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, and perhaps good evening as well, depending where people are. Nice. Hello, hello. Just looking for some familiar names.
Yeah.
How's everyone doing? All good? We have a chat box on the right side. Hey, if you want to pop in perhaps where you're calling from today, that would be interesting to hear how sparse we are around the world. Maybe some good mornings and some good evenings as well. Yeah, the session's being recorded as well, so you'll get that afterwards. Just on that, any questions that anyone has, if you'd like to ask them in the questions box as we go through this and we get on to more of the technical stuff, all the questions will be correlated. We'll ask and answer them at the end. Hello from London. Hello. I'm also based in London, Sweden. Nice and cold, definitely colder than London. Lovely. Florida, Seattle. Good stuff. So good morning indeed, and good afternoon from Leeds. Hey Dan, how's it going? South of France, that sounds rather nice. Hello from Germany. Madrid, hola. France. Good stuff. Blimey, we are
Where do you see the countries?
Sorry?
Where do you see the countries?
Where or in the chat box?
Hey.
Under everyone.
Okay.
Ireland.
And
Poland. Lovely. South Korea. Wow, that's all the way across the other side of the world. Pleasure. Welcome. Switzerland, Canada. Good stuff, guys. So we'll just hold on a couple more minutes while the rest of the people just filter in, but we will start shortly. Thanks everyone for joining so far. Belgium.
Belgium on top.
Nice. What's the time? We'll just wait. We'll hold on for one more minute. Just while the last few people are joining in. As I said before, we've got this questions tab on the right side. So any questions as we go through, pop them in there, and then we'll be sure to answer them at the end. I think a lovely prompt from Angela in the chat there. Where are you guys? Perhaps we could make a start with our introductions and kick things off just in a moment. So I'll just wait. There we go. The clock strikes 5 minutes past. Should we make a start, Francis?
All right.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah. So nice to meet you all. My name's George. I'm calling from London, and we have sunshine coming through, which is a lovely rare occasion. So it must mean good things. I'm an account executive here at Exalate. I've been here for a year. And yeah, this is me. I'll be hosting the presentation today and run through a quick agenda and stuff with you guys too. And I'll let Syed introduce himself and say hello as well.
Hi, everyone. This is Syed here, and I'm dialed in today from Lahore, Pakistan. I'm a pre-sales engineer with Adelco, and I'll be doing the technical part of the demonstration today for you guys. So welcome all to the webinar, and nice to see you all here today. I'll pass it on to Francis.
Yes, hello, and thanks to show up that massively. It's really impressive to see so many people joining for this session. I'm Francis. I'm a product manager for Exalate, and I will be answering your questions once that you have them. Okay.
Awesome. Nice. So yeah, keep it coming in the chat, guys. It would be interesting to hear where everyone's from. If you've got any questions, also what platforms you're using, and anything like that would be really interesting to hear from you guys. So I'm going to run through a little bit of a quick agenda, and then we'll kick off with the webinar. So I'm going to share my screen and go through a bit of a basic introduction of Exalate, what it is, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And I'll just outline some basic points. And then I'll hand over to Syed, who will share his screen and run through some real life use cases and customer challenges how to overcome that with Exalate and Groovy scripting. And then at the end, we'll save a little bit of time to run through some Q&A. Whatever you guys ask in that questions chat on the right tab, we'll save that and then run through any of that at the end. And then I'll just save a final part for some next steps and some information about our partners and Exalate as well. So that being said, I will kick off. I'll share my screen. Bear with me one moment. There we are. It sometimes looks a bit odd when you first share it, but can everyone see the Exalate presentation ahead of you on the screen? I'm hearing some buttons, so I'll assume that's a yes. I can't see the chat, but yeah, that sounds good. So just to introduce Exalate. So Exalate is the most flexible integration solution. Looking forward to explaining this in a bit more depth throughout this presentation for those that hasn't seen the product before. So Exalate, what is this integration about? We integrate with these 7 platforms on the right side. So we've got GitHub, Salesforce, Jira, and that's data center, server, and cloud, of course, as well. Salesforce, HPQC/ALM, Azure DevOps, ServiceNow, and Zendesk. Soon it'll be too long for me to start listing them because we keep adding them, adding more to the list there. So an exciting year ahead for us, definitely. So Exalate is a bi-directional synchronization solution, so you can have that two-way communication between your platforms. And as I've said, the platforms we support there. This can be used inside the same company, within different teams, within a group, or within that same project, or across multiple companies in that cross-company setting. And we'll hopefully highlight some interesting points about why Exalate is very good at that. So we've got this nice visual up on the screen here, which just helps to explain a bit of what Exalate does in this nice simple way to kind of illustrate the real-time effect of using Exalate. So we've just got a comment sync from Salesforce and then being synced across over to the Jira side as well. So why Exalate? We have over 3,000 installations on the Atlassian marketplace, which is pretty impressive. And we work with a whole range of companies across different industries and across different parts of the world as well. As we can see from the webinar, we're definitely stretched across the world there. As someone asked at the beginning, we are recording the presentation, but you also get this presentation as well. So you'll be able to click on these use cases if you'd like to find out a bit more information on how Exalate has helped customers with their integration needs in the past. So there's a bit more of an in-depth dive, and you can click and open these up. So I mentioned at the beginning, I think that Exalate was a decentralized integration solution, and that's really important here, and we're going to illustrate that today. So essentially, at a high level, what this means is that the systems wouldn't be stuck together; they would be loosely coupled, which gives you a lot of freedom when you're looking at integrating 2 platforms. So what does it actually mean, day to day? Exalate is installed and configured from both sides of the integration, as you can see from the diagram here. So that gives each side complete autonomy and control, and that customization really, so you can make that integration kind of work for you. So yeah, as we said here, that there's lots of benefits basically to doing this, but also having that integration from both sides is really, really interesting. So you can configure it on your favorite tool. So when you're opening your company border to work with another team, for example, in a different space, and you're dealing with confidential information, you can use Exalate to choose on a line-by-line basis on what information leaves your system and how you receive the information on the other side. So I won't steal all the limelight from Syed, but he'll explain that a little bit further on. Just to reiterate here, there's no risk of synchronizing confidential information because those systems are loosely coupled, they're not stuck together. And of course, with the admin on the other side, again, with the loosely coupled, there's nothing, there's no conversation happening there from that side. And there's no changes on the other platform affecting yours as it's decentralized there as well. So to go through a bit more of the architecture, I wouldn't want to go through all of that today. So this PDF, which will be popped into the chat now, you can have a quick look through that, which basically outlines all of Exalate's architecture and security for more of a back-end introduction into the tool. So we have a range of configuration modes when you're configuring Exalate. I'll just take a brief moment to run through those here. So the first two, we have the script mode and the visual mode. To start with the visual mode, as you can see on the left side of the screen here, in terms of field mapping and things like this, it can be seen to be a little bit easier with that basic kind of integration there. So if you have slightly easier or simpler requirements, I should say, then visual mode would be good because it's a little bit quicker to put together and a little bit more visual, as it says on the tin. And the script mode, which is hopefully what we're all here to talk about later on today, is our Groovy-based scripting engine. And this really gives you that customization and that ultimate kind of autonomy when you're looking to integrate your platforms. Also, finally, the basic plan, which is always worth mentioning. This is a no-code configuration, very quick and easy to set up. That's 1,000 syncs a month. There is no configuration, so it's really for those basic models and use cases that you'd like to complete. And you'd be able to sync summary, attachments, descriptions, and comments as well as setting up triggers and stuff like that. So yeah, I've given a quick run through just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Hopefully I haven't gone over that too quickly. I'm going to pass over to Syed, who's going to share his screen now and show you some real life use cases from Exalate as well. So I will hand over any questions that come up. Please ask them in the questions tab, and we will make sure to keep them and answer them at the end. Yeah, anything at all. So that being said, I will hand over to Syed.
Thank you very much, George. Hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yeah.
Yep.
George, can you please confirm if you're able to see the slideshow?
Yeah, it's just loading up now for me.
Cool.
For me also.
That's fine.
Yeah. Also, yeah.
Cool.
All good.
So, hi everyone. Welcome to this scripting webinar. What we will do today is we'll take a basic look at how Groovy scripting works. This is not meant to be a Groovy tutorial, but it's just going to focus on things within Groovy which Exalate engine uses. After taking a quick look at the Groovy side, we'll take a look at how Exalate works behind the scenes. So just a quick review of the basic concepts involved within Exalate itself, how it synchronizes, how it manages the data on both sides. After that, we'll give you some of the best practices and recommendations from our perspective of things which you should be following while you're planning a synchronization and while you're writing Exalate code, where you're writing the Groovy code for the Exalate synchronization. So there are a few best practices which should be followed. And we'll close this with a few exercises, 3 exercises, which would actually take a real life scenario and then use the Exalate scripting in order to resolve resolve a proper use case. So hope you guys enjoy this. A little bit about myself. My name is Syed Majid Hassan, and I'm based out of Lahore, Pakistan. And currently it's 8 p.m. here, so it's all dark, but it's all good. We've got people from all over the place, so thoroughly enjoying that. Personally, I'm a husband and I'm a dad of 2 6-year-old kids. Those are the little monsters you see out there. And my educational background involved degrees within computer science and business administration. But this was part of it was actually in the last century, so not very relevant here. My latest work experience was working as a level 2 support architect in a place called Crossover, which was kind of remote working since 2013, even before the pandemic. So I recently joined Exalate as a pre-sales engineer and thoroughly enjoying my ride so far. So let's begin by looking at Groovy itself, Apache Groovy, if to follow the proper naming conventions. Just a little disclaimer out here. We're not going to be diving deep into Groovy concepts itself. Groovy is a pretty involved language where you can have pretty advanced use cases and it could achieve a lot of things which you want to do. But Exalate requires a very basic sort of working of Groovy. This is not to say that you cannot use the advanced Groovy script within Exalate, but we're not going to be concentrating on that part within this webinar. So this is just supposed to be an introduction, and that's how we'll keep it. So Groovy itself is an object-oriented scripting language, which is fully Java syntax compatible. So you can use the entire Java syntax, the dot notation, to access the data members, methods of classes. And that is why it's so popular. It also has a counterpart of POJOs, if you're aware of plain old Java objects. So Groovy has its own take on it called POGOs, plain old Groovy objects. And the idea there is that all the setters getters are dynamically generated at runtime, at compile time by the compiler itself. A tool which we really recommend, which I would really recommend you to use, is the Groovy Web Console, right? So you've got the URL up here. The advantage of using this is that you can just open the web console within a browser, and you don't need to install a full-blown IDE or an interpreter on your machine. So you can just type Groovy code out here, hit the execute button, and you'll receive the output there and then right there in your browser. So it's very, very good when you're trying to learn Groovy, because you've got to run like little tests quickly, right, to check what the output is. And it's also very handy when you're debugging. So when you've got a code snippet which is not working, or whatever the reason is, you could just take that snippet out, go to the Groovy Web Console, and start troubleshooting it by seeing the output. So this is the tab we're going to be using a lot in this presentation, the output tab. But there are a couple of other tabs out here as well, the result and the stack trace. Stack trace is obvious, I think. So this would be where the errors and the exceptions live. And the result is usually used when the console itself is not producing any output, if you've written code which is actually returning a value instead of just printing it out on the screen. So that is used at that point. So yeah, very handy to use. I'm sure if you take a look, you'll be happy. So let's move to some actual Groovy concepts. Variable would be a good starting place, the most basic of things. So variable, as you know, is in any programming language is just literally a named memory location. It has a data type and it has a name, and it acts as a container where you can store stuff. The only important thing to remember here in Groovy's perspective is that there are two ways to define variables in Groovy. One is your traditional method whereby you have a data type followed by a variable name. So string message, int age, int x. So data type followed by the variable name. So that's like a conventional way of defining variables. So you can use that if you want, or you can use the dynamic typing approach of Groovy, whereby you can just say def and a variable name. So why this is dynamic is because you don't need to assign a data type to it at that point. Groovy automatically fixes that for you. So both ways are valid. Groovy variables are case sensitive. So some languages are like that, some not, but yeah, these definitely are case sensitive. So an age with a small a and an age with a capital A are two different beasts. So they're two different things and should be referenced properly. If you take a look at the println statement out here, so it says it's just got a string which is printing out their first age is this age, and then it's this age. So this $sign with two curly braces is called a string interpolation. And what you're doing is basically you've got a Groovy string, you've got a println string, and you want to put some variables in there, like concatenation sort of thing. So you can put any valid Groovy expression within these curly braces, and how it happens is that expression is evaluated and the value is printed out. So all scripting languages have something similar, and we're going to be using this extensively today. So the first age is with a small a, that prints a 10. The second age is with a capital A, that prints a 23. The second thing we want to look at while talking about Groovy is the safe navigation operator. That's a question mark followed by a dot. So hopefully, as most of you are using Exalate already, you would have come across this for sure. So what this is and what this does is, let's go over this a little bit. So instead of starting with the safe navigation itself, I'll start with the dot operator, because I think the safe navigation is essentially an extension on the dot operator itself. So the traditional dot operator, which is used to access like class members or methods of the class, is what it is. So we've got a class out here called company. Pretty rudimentary. All it's got is a couple of strings as data members, name and address. So you create an object called Acme for the company class. and then you use the dot operator traditionally to access the name and address. So that's pretty normal so far. When you do a println, so within the string interpolation, when you have acme.name, it would print the name field of the Acme object as well. So that gets printed, everything's all right. But what happens if the Acme object itself is null? What I mean to say is that if Acme itself does not have a reference, it's not a company object, it's null, like it is right now. What happens when you try to print it out? What happens is that Groovy would throw a null pointer exception. And yeah, that's where your stack trace would come in and you would get a null pointer exception. So this is where the safe navigation operator comes in. So think about a synchronization scenario now. Right now, what happened was that you were running some code, it ran into an exception, and the code broke over there. What if this was a synchronization? What if there was data coming in and that ran into a null pointer exception? How would that behave? That would crash your entire synchronization, right? Lots of problems. So we use the safe navigation to avoid the null pointer exception. How it works is that instead of the dot, you'll have the question mark dot. And now how it behaves is that if the first object, if the first argument operand is null, so if Acme is null now, this entire expression would return a null. I want to repeat that. So if there was a dot and Acme was null, it would have thrown a null pointer exception and the program would have crashed. But with the safe navigation operator, what this does is that if the first argument is null, it would just return you a null value. That wouldn't break anything. So as you see, that what is printed out is just another value. But the good part is it doesn't break anything. So this is like one of the uses of the safe navigation operator. Another reason why we use the safe navigation operator is to simplify code and to beautify code. So let's just think about this. Let's read this line. Println company.address.street.name. So the company object is referencing address, that is referencing street, and eventually you're printing out an attribute from there called name. Now, if any of those objects becomes null, like company address or street, what would happen? A null pointer exception and the code breaking there again, right? So in order to write fail-safe code, you would need to first check if company is not null, if address is not null, if street is not null. Only then would you go about executing this println statement, right? Otherwise, it's risky. So you would have a long if condition asking for company not null, address not null, street not null, and that's when you access this. So it's fine, that works, but it's just slightly messy. How you can simplify code is via using the safe navigation. So all you do is use the safe navigation at 3 places. The first one ensures company is not null, second one ensures address, third one ensures street. Any of them is null, the whole expression, remember, returns null, and just it doesn't break anything. It would just return a null value and you can deal with it within code. So that's one of the reasons why we also use the safe navigation. So yeah, as I was alluding to earlier, why the safe navigation is extensively employed in Exalate, there's a very good reason for that. You want to make your integration as robust as possible. You want to make your scripts so powerful that no scenario arriving from the other end should break them, right? That's the whole idea. So as an Exalate admin, you would ensure that nothing is left to chance. You would not depend on the other side to send over the correct values. You would just assume that, okay, a null might arrive, and then you'll have to deal with it. So you write code which is robust enough to deal with that. Again, let's pick a scenario. So let's say let's start from here, replica.reporter.email. So I know I haven't gone over the replica word, but hopefully you guys are aware this is just the object arriving from the other end, if you consider a sync scenario, it's arriving from the external system. So what you're checking is the reporter field, and from the reporter field, you're accessing the email address, and essentially then providing that email address to the node helper to find a user within your system, and then assigning your reporter field to it. But let's not go to this part. Let's just concentrate on this part. So what happens if reporter is null. Remember, you cannot control it. That's arriving from the other side. So if that is null, that breaks your code. You get a null pointer exception, and the result is a blocked sync. Your side blocks out. So you could have avoided that very simply by using the question mark dot out here, the safe navigation operator. So now if the reporter was null, this whole expression would just have returned null, and the issue dot reporter would have been assigned to null, rather than having a null pointer exception and a blocked sync. So hopefully that clarifies why you see a lot of question marks within Exalate code. That takes us nicely to the king himself, Mr. Elvis. So this is the Elvis operator. If somebody's not aware, this question mark and colon sign, which I'm sure you must have seen. So that this operator is called an Elvis operator, and it's obviously after Elvis himself. And why is it called the Elvis operator should be pretty clear on the screen right now. So apparently, if you twist the operator around, it resembles Elvis. It's to do with the hair and the puff and all that. So what does the Elvis operator do apart from entertaining us? So what Elvis does is pretty simple. So on the right side, if you look at it, it's an assignment statement, and the result variable is being assigned a value. Now, which value is it going to be? It's value question mark colon value 2. So how Elvis works is, if value 1 is not null, it just simply picks it up, assigns it to result, full stop. So if value 1 is not null, it's just simply assigned to result, that's it. But if value 1 is null, then Elvis comes into the picture and picks value 2 and assigns that to the result variable. So instead of me like trying to explain it in words, I think if you look at the code snippet on the left, this is exactly what the Elvis operator does. So if value 1 is not null, then value 1 is assigned to result. Otherwise, value 2 is assigned. So one of the reasons why Elvis should be used often is just clear right now on your screen. Like, it avoids these 4 lines of codes and ambiguity, and not ambiguity, but like it's just code complexity, isn't it? It's just another thing you can avoid by using a simple notation. Again, we use Elvis extensively within Exalate. And yeah, the reason is just to simplify the logic of the code. So it's exactly what the last slide was saying. So you have an if condition, if block, which is 4 lines of code. And if you can achieve the same thing using just 1 line of code with the Elvis operator, then yeah, why not? So let's consider this scenario. If replica.priority.name is null, so you're expecting a priority field arriving from the other end. And if the name of that priority field is null, I mean, what that means is that, sorry, apologies, is not null. I'll repeat that. So the priority arriving from the other end, if that priority is not null, then great. You want to pick up that priority and you want to assign it to your fine. But what if it is null? Then that would trigger the else part, and what you want to do is you want to assign some default value, whatever it is, medium priority or whatever, to your issue priority. So it's a pretty standard piece of code which any Exalate admin would have to deal with, right? So let's simplify this. How you would simplify this using Elvis would be via this line. So replica.priority.name, and then there's the Elvis. So essentially what happens is that if the first value is not null, if priority has arrived from the other end, then we're great. We just pick that up, assign it to the issue priority. But if it is null, then you use the default value. So again, this you would see Elvis used a lot within Exalate scripts, and it's just to simplify the logic of the code. So just remember, if the first value is not null, that gets assigned. Otherwise, the second value. Right. We'll move to another quick concept in Groovy called closures. Now, closures are used extensively as well. So I just wanted to have a little quick review of what that is. So what a closure is an anonymous block of code within curly braces, essentially. So essentially, if you look at these curly braces and this bit of code, so this is a closure within Groovy. Now, if you look further in this closure, what this is doing is that it's taking two parameters called x and y. It's multiplying them, and it's returning you the product of those two parameters, whatever they are. So how closures are used a lot is that you just assign them to a variable, and then you can call it like a function. So if this closure is assigned to multiply, you can just call multiply as you were calling a normal function, and it would just literally return the product of the two 12. So you'll see a lot of this when we're dealing with data structures within Groovy. Speaking of data structures, the first one is a list, which we're going to be looking at. So a list is like, you can think of list as a one-dimensional data structure, literally just as a list of items, right? So a list is a collection, and it's a collection of items. Those items can be primitive data types, like integer, float, whatever, or it can be object references itself. So as you see in the first line, it's a list of 4 integers, and the list is called a number list. The way to define it is the dynamic typing approach again, def and a name, and that's it. The second list is a list of strings, Angular, Groovy, Java, and that is called languages. Now, if you look at the println statement, all we're doing over there is referencing the number list and printing the size of it. So all this would say is that the number list has 4 items in it. If you consider that what the basic use of a list would be, so you would literally just create a list, you would add some items to it, and you would read some items from it. So pretty simple, you've already defined a list. Let's add something to it using the add method. And in order to read the list, the easiest way is just to reference the list within the string interpolation. So it would just print out the entire contents of the list. So yeah, actually this is good to look at because it had 4 items. You added 15. You printed it out, so it would print out the entire list, including 15. One of the methods we need to use a lot of is each, E-A-C-H, each. What each does is that it's better to think of each as a loop rather than anything else. It's closest to a loop, the approach. So what it does is it iterates over the contents of a list. So what each does is it picks up each item of the list one at a time, and then it executes the closure, which is written out here. So all that is saying is that println it into 2, it into 2. So this it references the list item. So in the first execution of each, it will be 1, the first item. Then in the next execution, it will be 2, it will be 3. And you can do whatever manipulation you want or within this closure. So this time I'm multiplying all the items by 2 and just literally printing them out. The next method is the find method, which you can use on lists. And this is pretty simple. It's used to search something from within a list. So again, I'll keep the example simple. It's 11, 12, 23, 34 within the list. And what I'm saying is that list.find it greater than 15. So what I'm asking for is items which are greater than 15. So obviously the 2 items, 23 and 34. Now find will return you the first occurrence of the search term. So the first value it finds will be 23, obviously, and that is what it'll return. Find all, on the other hand, it's the same example, but with find all. So find all, on the other hand, would return you all the instances, so 23 and 34. So that's the only difference between find and find all. Find returns the first instance, find all returns all of them. Collect is used to collect is a method which is used to manipulate a list and then return a manipulated list. So you can have a closure which manipulates the list items, and then you'll obviously have a new list, and then that list could be returned itself using collect. So it's a pretty simple example where I'm just literally concatenating the word hi with the string items and just literally printing out the entire list. So some more list methods for you to look at later on. They're pretty simple. We looked at add, contains does what it says. It just finds out whether the list contains a certain item or not. Right, the next data structure we want to look at is a map. And a map is essentially an unordered list of key value pairs. So it's an unordered collection, which is just key value pairs. So whatever you insert within a map has to be a key value. Now, what is a key value? It's something like this. So Sylvia can be a key value, and blonde would be the actual value of the item. When you think about a list, think about a one-dimensional structure, right? But when you think about a map, think about a two-dimensional structure. So one is a key field, and that references a value. We use the key field to search or index the map itself. So we assigned some keys, some values, and you use the def again. Now, how you reference this is the interesting part, and that's what is used a lot in Exalate as well. So if I have a map out here called hair color, and I need to find out the value for Sylvia. So what I'm going to do is hair color, and then in square brackets, I'm going to say Sylvia. So what I'm doing here is I'm searching the map for Sylvia, for the key value Sylvia. And if I find it, I get the corresponding value returned, which is what I wanted. So this would return blonde, and that would be printed out here in the next statement. I'm doing the same thing again with another map out here. It's called the age map. So you've got the names of people, and you've got integer ages. So what you're doing here is using the each method exactly the same way you used in the lists. So it iterates over each map member, and it's called entry. Each entry is called an entry, and you can pick the entry key and entry value, concatenate that, and just start using it within your script. I'm not going to go over the find and the find all because it's exactly the same as how it behaves within the lists. The behavior is exactly the same. So again, I'm looking for values which are greater than 20. Find returns the first instance. So I'm going to get John 23, the very first instance which hits. And find all is obviously going to return all the instances. So you're going to get John, Jane, and Kate in this time. Right, hope that all made sense to you. That was a rather quick breeze through the Groovy constructs. As I said at the outset, we're not going to dive deep into Groovy at all. We're just going to look at Groovy concepts which are relevant to Exalate scripting. And as you saw, these are pretty basic concepts. So Groovy is pretty advanced, as I said, and you can use all that within Exalate as well, but that was not the scope of today's session. So now we are going to go and look at how Exalate works behind the scenes. We'll take a quick look at how Exalate is going to work. Hopefully, most of you are already familiar with that, but if you're not, we'll just take a look now. It's a short video of 5 minutes. It'll explain you how to set up a sync and how you install and how you go about doing things. So hope you enjoy this.
Don't think we can actually hear it, Syed, unfortunately.
Let's say we want to sync Jira.
Oh.
Apologies.
My mistake. Now we can. That did come through.
You can?
So
okay.
Try again. Could you unmute yourself, Syed? I think that might help. Thanks, Darren.
And see how the solution actually works in practice. Let's begin. We need to start by installing Exalate on each side of the connection. After Exalate has been installed on both Jira and Zendesk, a connection needs to be established between them. Then it's time to set up our first sync between a Zendesk ticket and a Jira issue. What Exalate will do at this point is that it will transform the ticket into a message which will be sent from the Zendesk side to the Jira side. This message contains the information that should be applied on the receiving side. This is what we call exhalating an issue. Just keep in mind that you can decide what information should be sent over to the other side, and more importantly, what should not. There will be more details about this in a moment. On the Zendesk side, the outgoing sync processor will decide what information will get sent over. Transferring the message between the two environments will be done securely, meaning that the message is sealed, encrypted, and signed before being sent over. Once sealed, the message will get added to a sync queue. Changes or updates are queued in the sync queue to be applied automatically in the same order as their initiation in case of downtimes or failures. When Exalate on the Jira side receives the message, it will open it up and apply it to a local issue, according to the instructions in the incoming sync processor. This processor provides the flexibility to ensure that the local business rules are respected. For instance, in case there isn't a local issue, Exalate can create one in any way that makes sense. Of course, this is all done in the most secure way, and if you're curious to learn more about that, there is an Exalate Security and Architecture white paper you can check out. Let me add this on a side note. The ticket and the issue are called a twin, where the Zendesk ticket is the parent and the issue is the child. Don't get me started on family ties. These are just some names we tend to give these things. All right, this basic sync scenario is used over and over again in both directions between any two issue trackers. A ticket is changed, a message is generated, it's sent over to the other side, and it is applied to the issue and the other way around. And this is all possible because Exalate allows for bidirectional or two-way synchronization. Exalate comes in two configuration modes, the script and the visual mode. The script mode is Exalate's most powerful mode as it supports almost any sync scenario. But if you're not a fan of code and you'd rather not use the script mode, then you can simply choose the visual mode instead. No code, more intuitive. And here we are. You have successfully established a basic sync between your Jira and Zendesk. You've also become familiar with all the terms that we use throughout this simple Jira Zendesk sync. And like I said, you can also set up an integration between any other issue trackers like ServiceNow, Salesforce, GitHub, Azure DevOps, and more. You can check out these terms in the Exalate Security white paper.
Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed that and the sound was audible. Manush is gonna put the link to the security and architecture white paper in the chat box. So if anyone's interested, you can just go through that. Right. So that was just a little bit about how Exalate works behind the scenes. Right, as I was saying, this was just a little bit about how Exalate works behind the scenes. So you saw how the first step would be to install Exalate on both work systems. The second logical step would be to create a connection between the two ITSM systems. And yeah, both systems start talking after that. And then it's the nice little funs and games which we enjoy with the sync. Right, so I promised you some of the recommendations which we would be giving, which is how we think you should set up your development sync. So development environment essentially is you writing scripts, testing them out, and seeing how Exalate behaves there, and basically learning through the process as well, and finalizing your sync scenarios based on your business rules. So how we recommend setting this up is via 4 tabs. So the first tab would contain the connections. The second would be the error screen. The third would be the sync queue. And lastly, you have an issue, an actual ticket, which you would test out, where you would test out your scripts. Right, so let's go into those tabs a little bit. So if you look at the first tab, it's the connections tab, which simply contains your sync, your scripts, the outgoing scripts and the incoming scripts. A lot more on that to come, so we'll move on from here. The only thing to note out here is that whenever you make a change to the script, you click on the publish button, and that makes those changes live. That's what triggers those changes. The second screen is the error screen, which is, well, in my opinion, a very, very crucial screen to get your head around, basically. So synchronization errors can happen for a variety of reasons. Due to the very nature of the beast itself, like there are two different systems talking across different networks and then over the internet, you need to be careful about what sort of errors can occur. In any case, when an error occurs, it could either be a blocking error or a non-blocking one. So what that essentially means that if it's a blocking error, it would block your sync. For that connection, that would be blocked until an admin comes in, resolves that error, and then moves on. So the error screen would be very useful in that scenario. The second thing is while debugging, and I'll show you that in a minute. The next screen is the third tab is the sync queue. And sync queue is just simply a place where all the sync events line up nicely. So whenever you trigger a sync, Exalate fires off a sync event. It creates a sync event and puts it nicely within the queue. And the queue is bifurcated in the outgoing and the incoming paths. So you can keep an eye on what's going on within your system. So if sync events start piling up, you know there's an issue there. So, and you've got separate tabs for attachments out there as well. Again, I'll show you sync queue in a minute in action. And lastly, but probably most importantly, that's the test ticket. So you've done all your development, you've set up the environment, you've clicked the publish button, now you need to test it. So for that to happen, you need to trigger a sync. So you need to make an event happen on a ticket, which would trigger the sync, and then you would monitor how that goes. So we'll be looking back into that in a minute as well. I want to talk briefly about the remote replica. This is a word which we use very often when talking about Exalate internals. In the video, you heard a message being talked about. So a message gets thrown from one side and it arrives at the second side. That message is essentially our replica object. So a replica is a copy of an issue which gets transferred to the other instance. So that's the message which we were talking about, the secure one. Now, how the sync processes work is that, as I showed you earlier, like when you install a scripted connection, you have an outgoing sync processor and an incoming sync processor on both sides. So essentially what you're doing is you're picking stuff from the issue object, assigning it to the replica variable, and that replica variable is being sent over to the other side. Now on the other side's responsibility would essentially be picking data out of that replica and placing it within its local issue object. Again, I'm going to go into this in more detail later on. But yeah, this is something how we recommend setting up an environment. And this is how actually we do it internally, like when troubleshooting and stuff like that. So this is the same 4 browser tabs, which I showed you earlier. But over here, you've got both the ITSM systems side by side. You've got Zendesk on the left side, you've got Jira on the right side. And this sort of 2 windows set and a 4 tab setup within those 2 windows, it really helps us. It really helps us keep context. And keeping context is like half of the game when it comes to synchronization efforts. So what does keeping context mean? Keeping context means essentially knowing what is happening and where your data is. So because once you trigger a sync, it passes through a whole number of things, right? It goes to the outgoing sync processor, then to the outgoing sync queue, then gets sent over the internet to the incoming sync queue on the other side. So you kind of need to know where your message is exactly in order to troubleshoot it effectively. So to be a good Exalate admin, I think context is everything. And yeah, this sort of helps us to keep context. Right, a couple of golden rules. So that was our recommended way of setting up the environments. A couple of golden rules which we have is leave nothing to chance and always ensure you maintain your context. The second one I think I've already spoken about. So always focus on where your message is, where the problem lies, and then troubleshoot that part, because there are so many moving parts in this, in any synchronization effort. There'll be so many moving parts that context is probably the most important thing. You need to know what you're doing at all times. The first thing I alluded to when I was talking about the safe navigation operator, leave nothing to chance. Do not assume that the data being sent is clean and nice. So you could have a null value being sent over. You could have an actual valid value being sent over. You could have an outlier being sent over. So make sure you think about all those scenarios and then actually code them. So within your scripts, you should have like all those conditions handled, and then your script would never break. So just a couple of like warnings if you say that things which we use internally a lot. So once you've got your development environment set up, like you've got that four browser window set up, you've got contact, you've got a huge screen where you've got those two windows side by side, and you have context, you know exactly what you're doing. Now you need to start developing your sync scripts. So in order to do that, again, there are a few recommended practices. Some of them are really obvious. Always start with a one-directional sync. Now, Exalate is a powerful thing whereby as soon as you create a connection, it's actually a bidirectional connection by default. So you don't do anything, but it's like it's syncing bidirectionally. But in order to start an actual development effort, just start thinking about one direction. Pick one system on the left, one system on the right, and think about sending data from this system to this system. The second thing would be to create a map of fields, like what fields from the originating side you want to send over and which fields do you want to map them to on the destination side, right? Make a list of it. And then go about coding it in actual sync scripts, right? So what sync scripts would you be using? Have a think about it. So you have the outgoing and the incoming on this side, you have the outgoing and the incoming on this side. So in order to achieve a one-way sync, all you need to do is you need to use the outgoing on one system and the incoming on the other system. So it's just these two bits of code which you'll be touching to achieve this one-directional sync. So again, something quite obvious, test thoroughly. And once you're satisfied with it, include further complex fields to it. Now, once you're satisfied with some basic fields, include some further fields into it. And then once you're fully satisfied with the one-way synchronization, that's when we would recommend to come back with the two-way. Something I spoke about as well, that create an inventory of fields which you want to sync. So create like a list of fields, summary, description, comments, attachments, and actually try to have the data type listed as well. The data type is very handy. Yeah, for all sorts of reasons. So when you receive data from the other system, essentially, if it's a string, you need to typecast it. So let's take an example. So let's say you want to change the assignee field within Jira. The assignee field takes a user object. Just for example, imagine that there's a string coming over from the other side. So you would need to typecast that within to a user object in order to get it assigned to the assignee. But that's the idea. That's why, like, the more aware you are of what data types are involved, the better the chances are of you being successful on first attempt. So once you've thought about the one-way sync, once you've made a list of which fields you want to do, that's when you start coding your outgoing and incoming sync processes. Cool. So that's the real stuff, right? So what do you do in the outgoing sync processor? Essentially, what you do is you pick up fields from your issue object, which is your ticket on your outgoing system, your ticket object, and you pick the fields from there and you assign it to the replica variable. Pretty simple, right? It's just an assignment statement. You pick up a field value and then you assign it to a variable called replica. Now, Exalate would wrap up this replica and send it over to the other end. Now, what does the other end need to do? The other end essentially needs to unpeel that onion, right? That replica onion. It needs to unpeel that. It needs to pick up all those fields, and then it's completely independent to do whatever it wants to with those fields. You don't have to put the summary in the summary. You can put it anywhere you want. But yeah, obviously, logically, whatever summary is arriving, you would put it in summary. But just to make a point, you could have anything on the left side to be able to assign it to that. So yeah, I just want to pause here for a second to help you absorb it or just make it very, very clear of how this works. The outgoing, essentially, all the issue data and assigns that to a replica variable. The replica variable is sent over and to the other side. Don't know how I got to that slide, but okay, yeah. So the replica is sent over to the other side. The other side picks up data from that replica object and assigns it to its local issue object. So again, let's keep context. We're talking about the incoming sync, right? So we're on the destination system. So the issue is the issue on the destination system. This is the new issue being created by Exalate, right? So let's move on to a little bit of a debug to see how you would debug an Exalate connection, right? So it's a pretty simple example. And what we would be doing here is we would be using a debug.error statement. So hopefully you're already aware of the debug.error. You can just put it anywhere in code for debugging purposes. You can print out a message. So basically what happens is the code execution stops at that point, prints out a value, whatever you say. And yeah, you could start to troubleshoot from there and move along from there. So what we're going to do here is that from a Jira Cloud issue, we're going to try and print out the assignee object. The eventual goal is to pick up the username of that assignee object, right? So just bear with me while this plays. So yeah, we're just going to use the debug.error and print out the assignee object. Just give me a second. Sorry, apologies for this inconvenience. My video seems to be stuck, so I'm just going to give it a few more seconds to load up. Right, sorry about that. So as I said, we're going to be looking at how to use the debug.error in order to basically add debugging to your outgoing and incoming sync scripts. So what we're going to be doing here is to be printing the assignee object out, right? So within the outgoing sync script, we're going to add a debug.error statement, which would print out the assignee object. Now, the reason for putting it in the outgoing sync script is that as soon as the sync is triggered from that end, you would get you would get the assignee object printed out. But yeah, my video seems to be struggling a little bit. So, Francis, can I ask you to share that presentation if you've got it up? Is that a possibility?
One moment.
Apologies, but it seems to be.
Okay.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah, you did.
Apologies.
Screen. Let me know if this works.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, Syed. So what Syed wanted to explain is how you can debug a connection, and that's by using the debug error, where we here type just a debug statement. Yeah. And so whenever a sync transaction is started in a connection which contains the debug error, yeah, an error will be raised. Yeah. And that can be used to actually show what the content of a certain field is. For instance, here, issue.assigny, that gave this hash key. But if you use the navigation operator and to get the email itself, and you refresh the error screen, you will see what's there. Yeah. Also, you can use, and that's a really handy one that we're using a lot, is the properties method. Like here, you can see the name is, if you refresh, yeah, here, you can see that the name, well, is not known. And at that moment, what you want to know is, okay, how is the name called on that structure? So you would then use properties to see what the content of a structure is. Okay, so if you refresh here, yeah, you can see all the details of that structure itself. Now, what we want to show with this thing is that you can have a rapid development cycle where you just change something on your script, and you can then immediately see what effect the change has on the results of the script itself. All right.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I can try and share again.
Yeah, or I can go through the slides and you can continue.
Okay. So, right. So hopefully what you saw there was number one, the value of the 4-tab approach that I showed you, right? So what you were doing is making changes within the code, thinking about what you want to do with the debug.error, quickly implementing it, checking the error screen, getting some valuable information out of there, and then moving back and changing. So you keep switching back between those 2-3 tabs to see what's going on and how your development effort continues. Right. So following on, we're going to be looking at 3 examples, which are 3 real use cases, and we're going to be achieving them on the Zendesk to Jira synchronization. So basically, we'll follow the golden rule. We'll use one-side sync. So we'll send data from Zendesk to the Jira side, right? There's a very nice installation video and a configuration video for Zendesk to Jira, which we have. So Manoush is going to pop that link into the chat box now if you want to watch that for later. But right now, what we're going to be doing is simply scripting the things out there. One thing you need to be very, very, very careful about is the nomenclature. So each work system has its own naming conventions of things. So as you know, if you're a Jira person, you call everything an issue. But if you're a Zendesk person, you call everything a ticket. And if you're a Salesforce person, similarly, you call everything a case. So every work system has its own nomenclature, and you've got to be really careful when writing scripts to ensure that you follow the correct labeling approach. So let's move to the first exercise and see how that goes. So the first exercise, the requirement out there is pretty simple. We're starting off really simply. And the requirement is simply to send the summary and the description, these 2 fields, from Zendesk to the Jira side, right? One way again. So you make a quick inventory down there. You think about what fields you're going to map. So you're going to map the summary and description to the summary and description within Jira. So I want you to pause for a second here and think about what you're going to do and how you're going to achieve this. I'll repeat myself. So you're sending summary and description from the Zendesk side to summary and description on the Zendesk side. So which bits do you touch and how do you touch them? So within the Zendesk outgoing side, you need to pick up the summary and description, place them in the replica, and then send them over to the other side. And the other side would deal with taking things out of the replica and assigning them. So as you can see on the side-by-side screen. I know it's not very visible, but essentially what you're doing is Zendesk is picking up the summary and description, right, from its ticket object, assigning it to the replica, which is sent over to the other side. And now the other side deals with assigning it back to its local issue object, right? Let's see that in action now. And so in order to see that in action, we'll need to trigger the sync. So we'll just exalate the Zendesk ticket. You can see the ticket subject is script seminar, and you can see a little description at the bottom. So once you exalate this, the sync queue comes in handy again. Again, that's the fourth thing approach. So the sync queue shows you an incoming transaction, and as soon as Francis refreshed it, the transaction went away. So what happens is that the incoming transaction came in and was processed already, and the ticket was created. So eventually the result is that the subject and the summary and the description arrived to the Jira side, and the Jira ticket got created. It's a pretty simple requirement to start off with. Let's take a quick look at the requirements for the example 2. So exercise 2 gets slightly more complex, right? So what you're going to do here is pick up the labels from Zendesk and assign them to a select list within Jira. So on the Zendesk, if you're familiar with Zendesk, labels, tags and labels is the same thing. So the nomenclature used by Zendesk is tags. So you add a tag within the Zendesk ticket that gets sent over to Jira. Now in Jira, you have a user-defined drop-down menu with some custom values, right? Like you can see on the screen, camera, printer, disk, all those. The idea is that based on the value of the tag, you need to make the correct selection within the product menu, within the product drop-down, right? So again, let's think about this. What does Zendesk need to do? All that Zendesk needs to do is to send over the tag's value. I think that is about it. And on the receiving end, on the outgoing sync, on the incoming sync side, what you need to do is you need to iterate over the values. So let's look at the Zendesk first. So it's just literally sending over the labels. So on the Jira side, what you need to do is you have a list of allowed products. You iterate over the list. In line number 3, you iterate over the list, and you match the tag which is coming in to your products list. Whenever there's a hit, whenever there's a match, that's when you select, make the selection. There are more caveats here, though. You can notice the capitalize function being used. Now, this is because Zendesk uses everything in lowercase. It's an annoying thing, but this is how Zendesk works. So every tag, even if you include a capital letter within a tag, it gets downgraded to lowercase. So when that lowercase tag arrives at Jira end, you need to capitalize it. Otherwise, you won't get a match within your select list, right? So that's the attention to detail which an Exalate admin needs to have in order to cover all possible bases. Right. So if we move to the next slide, please. So have we covered all the bases? Let's see. First, let's take a look at this in action. So first, on the Jira side, we'll take a look at the dropdown, which has all those values populated. And now the idea is to go to the Zendesk side. Notice the 4 tabs setup on both systems. On the left, there's Zendesk. On the right, there's Jira. So we're just going to add a tag to the Zendesk ticket, submit it, and this would create a sync event which would be sent to Jira. So if we go to the Jira sync queue, we'll see the event arriving within our incoming sync, right? So that's the event which is arriving. It'll be processed with by Exalate, and eventually the ticket would be updated. The result would be that the correct selection would be made within the product drop-down menu. So it's not a very advanced case, but it's fairly involved, especially considering how you need to take care of the capitalization and stuff. So have we covered everything on this? Let's think about this. What happens if a user enters 2 values within the tags field, which have an exact match in the dropdown? So you enter a disk and you enter an LCD. How do you deal with it? You can only select one thing within the dropdown. So how my code dealt with it was it used the find method instead of the find all. So it just picked up the first instance, the first hit, and it assigned that value. The second thing which we didn't talk about at all, the second point out here, is what happens if the tag is not present at all in the list. So if the Zendesk user enters something which is not present within the Jira list, what do you want to do? Number one is just simply ignore it. Don't do anything with that sync transaction. Number two is that you can raise an error from within the script code. You can raise an error that could inform the admin, and that is how you can deal with it. The number three, the most dynamic approach would be you can add the value to the select list at runtime. What that means is that if a tag value arrives at Jira end, that value is not present in the dropdown, you can simply add it using the Exalate code. So yeah, something to think about. Right, let's move to our last example, which is a very common use case within which we see day in, day out. And this is a many-to-many mapping between two fields. One is a user-defined field called mood on the Zendesk side. It's a drop-down on the Zendesk side. And then there's the system standard priority field on the Jira side. It's a many-to-many mapping. The table shows you that if the customer is delighted, we want the ticket to be of lowest priority. If the customer is happy, we want it low. This is not how we work, but yeah, it's just an example. So yeah, again, how do you deal with this? Zendesk, again, all Zendesk needs to do is to ensure that the mood value is sent over. So within the Zendesk outgoing sync script, all you will see is the mood value, the mood field being sent over. The rest of the magic happens on the incoming side, right? So there's the map we were talking about. It's got the key is the Zendesk side. And again, notice all letters are lowercase. This is just how Zendesk works. So yeah, essentially, you match the value coming into the Jira side. So whatever replica is sending over, you match that value with the corresponding value in the map, and that's the priority value you assign. So pretty normal, but yeah, it's a case which is used a lot. Right, if we take this, take a look at this in action. So what you'll have is a very standard priority field within Jira with the 5 values. But on the Zendesk side, you'll have a custom mood field, which would have those 5 custom values, which we just talked about. And how this happens is that once you trigger the sync, once you change the value and trigger the sync, Exalate would pick that change up, send it over to Jira, and again, it would appear within your incoming sync queue. As soon as the change is processed, it vanishes from the incoming sync queue, and that means that the ticket has been updated with the correct priority value. So yeah, that is how this would be done. Take a look at another example. Right, again, so again, the change came over into the incoming sync script. Again, it'll take a second to get processed and eventually gets picked up and deposited on the Jira end, which would eventually change the priority to highest, I think it was. Yep, so there you go. That's the change which is registered. So yeah, as you can see, you can pick up real life use cases, use some basic scripting knowledge. We haven't used anything advanced so far, just use basic scripting knowledge and achieve those use cases. So hopefully you've seen the flexibility of the tool today. I would leave you with a thought that what Groovy scripting gives to Exalate and what Exalate can achieve for your business is an infinite world of possibilities. Again, because you're able to use the Groovy scripts within Exalate, you can process anything. Whatever you can code, you can process, right? So flexibility is the key here. So pretty much all business use cases would be doable, but some via simple scripting like we did today, some via advanced scripting. The second huge advantage is that the Exalate API provides a unified approach for accessing the underlying issue tracker. You're dealing with Zendesk, you're dealing with Salesforce, you're dealing with ServiceNow, you're dealing with Jira. All these issue trackers are different. But if you step one layer up and you are in the sync script, you just use the words issue.summary issue.customfields.mood.value. So it's like a same layer which gets applied to all of the different work systems. So that uniformity gives like a real power to Exalate. And lastly, it's something which is again very useful for clients. It's the capability to externalize these scripts. So you can have them in an SVN or a service or a source control module, and you can externalize them and have them secure on that end. So yeah, it's something for maybe another webinar someday. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for your time. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And back to you, George.
Nice one. Perfect. Thank you, Syed. That was great. There's lots of great questions that have been asked also in the chat as well. So take a flick through. Yeah, big shout out to Jordan as well, who's been helping out, one of our partners as well. So thank you. Yeah, it's been really good to see some questions. So we are going to get to the Q&A shortly. I'm just going to share my screen and run through a little note on the partners indeed. So I will hit share. Perfect. So just a quick note on our partner program. We have over 130 partners across the world. I know I did answer a question earlier in the chat about this as well. Obviously, we've touched on some maybe slightly more technical or in-depth concepts today. And if perhaps you don't have as technical background, then our partners can help you out as well. I'm just going to go off that because that might be making people a bit dizzy as I was watching it kind of falling in front of me. So yeah, our partner program is really great. So we'll be able to, yeah, please reach out if you do need any assistance from our partners, and they can help you with everything from licensing and getting set up and configured, and any questions and additional support as well. So just before we move on to the Q&A, I will say if you want a bit more of an in-depth session with Syed himself or another member of our team, then you'll be able to book a demo as well. I think someone will have popped the link in the chat. If you're eager to get hands-on with the tool and just start coding and give it a go, then you'll also be able to start a 30-day free trial for Exalate too. So I think those have just gone into the chat. So yeah, do make use of them. It would be great to keep in touch. But here's my name and email and a slightly more tanned picture of myself in the summer. Unfortunately, we're not like that in the UK now. And our phone number as well. And we're based in Belgium. I'm in London. We also have Deepak, who is based in India. So we're all around the world, as well as our US team as well. So we've got Emmanuel, Emma over in the US, and Emmerich as well. So yeah, plenty of touch points if you want to reach out, no matter where you are. So yeah, perfect. I will hand over to Francis, and he can make a start with the Q&A. I know we've taken some note of some of the good questions, and we'll work our way through those. So Francis, would you like to share your screen, and we can make a start?
All right. So a big thank you to Manush and Teja, who have been processing all questions and creating inserting it in a couple of slides. And so quite a bit of interesting questions came up. So let's try to get to a good answer. If you don't get the answer that you were expecting, or if the explanation is unclear, which is totally possible, then don't hesitate to reach out to us to provide you more context or more information. Also, we do have a community site which is used more and more by Exalate users to discuss use cases and implementation approaches. Okay, so first of all, let's go through the questions. The first one was we use Exalate to sync between a Jira server and Jira Service Management server. Users would like to be able to control the sharing with an organization from the internal Jira issue. So this is an example of a more advanced configuration. It's a bit too extensive to answer during this Q&A session itself, but don't hesitate to raise a question on the community site. Okay. The next question is there a way to automatically create tickets from Zendesk to Jira? Example, when end user or customer in Zendesk raises a request, instead of the agent pushing a button, have it sent automatically. Exalate has the concept of triggers, which is like a query, which will exalate all the issues which match a certain condition. For instance, if you would say, well, a ticket which is high priority should be sent to that JIRA, or a ticket related to assets should be sent to our ServiceNow, that's totally possible to be configured thanks to triggers. Now, again, a lot of documentation is available on the documentation site, and we welcome you to have a look there to get that question answered. Next question. How do you prevent feedback loops when sending messages between tickets? So you can imagine that you have a Zendesk ticket which gets updated, that triggers a synchronization transaction, which changes a field on the Jira issue, and that change would then trigger a new update on the Zendesk, and that would be a loop. So Exalate has a basic loop avoidance implementation where changes made by the proxy user will not be synchronized back, and that's really covering like 89% of the cases. We did have a user who created a loop by creating two connections. So you had between two JIRAs, you had a connection. You had two connections, and so the update that was triggered by one connection was then pushed back to the first JIRA, creating a loop that created like 2,000 issues in a couple of minutes. And so, yes, you have to be really careful and really think through the use case whenever you do the implementation. Yeah. The next question is it possible to transfer images and files in addition to comments to update tickets between ServiceNow and Zendesk? The answer is yes. And what you see here is the way how you get it done. So on the outgoing sync, and it can be on the Zendesk side or on the ServiceNow side, you just you just insert the attachments into the replica, into the message that will be sent over. And on the receiving end, you will specify that these attachments need to be merged into the issue. And there's a method on the attachment helper, merge attachments, which will ensure that attachments are not duplicated. It will take care of a number of business rules. Yeah? And so we think that this is really a simple way to implement this functionality. Next question is, I want to understand if there are any performance consequences of the sync, like if closing, leaving of the ticket, if that takes a moment or if it is without delays. Thank you. So the question is how long does it take before a change on one platform is being propagated to the other platform? And then again, like in many IT projects, it depends. So in the case of Jira, Zendesk, Azure DevOps, the integration between the issue tracker and Exalate is through webhooks, meaning that whenever there's a change made, that change will be propagated immediately to the other side. In case of other issue trackers like ServiceNow, HP Quality Center, and I believe GitHub, there's a polling mechanism where the Exalate will ask the tracker, did something change? And of course, you will have to wait for the next poll to ensure that that change is then propagated correctly. And the default configuration is about 50 seconds, but that can be changed in the platform itself. Next one. Are there dependencies regarding the Exalate versions on both ends, or does any Exalate version on one end work with any Exalate version on the other end? And the answer is yes. So you can have, you don't need to have the same versions between the different platforms, and that's because Exalate is really translating a local entity or local issue information into a common message, which is then consumed on the other side. And that common message is identical to all the different platforms. There is one caveat though, is that the Exalate can run for 2 years, a version. And so there's a bit of a hard stop after 2 years, because we want to avoid to be locked into a certain version itself. So meaning that if we want to allow the Exalate network to evolve their protocols and so on and so forth. So Exalate provides a guarantee that it will be backward compatible for at least 2 years. Is there a way to automatically create tickets from Zendesk to Jira? Yeah, that question we had already. We want to sync Jira and Azure DevOps, mainly with the test case and test execution data, along with the automation. So currently, Azure DevOps is not supporting test cases or test execution data. That's on the backlog. That's something that we want to implement. Next one, our plan is to use Exalate to allow ServiceNow record creation to initiate Jira record creation and potentially sync the field values. This is the core use case that Exalate provides. If you want to have an in-depth demonstration, please reach out to George, to Syed, or to any of our colleagues. Next one, we want to sync Jira DataSend to ServiceNow. That's the same question. Exalate is supporting all the versions of Jira Data Center, Jira Server, Jira Cloud, and the way that it interacts is the same. Yeah, and so also on ServiceNow, all the different versions are supported, and our quality control checked yesterday the compatibility with San Diego, which is an upcoming ServiceNow version, and also there Exalate is compatible. Next question is, could you go into detail about the usage of issue custom fields, entity custom fields, and replica custom fields? What's the difference? Okay, so okay, yeah. So when Exalate started, it started as a integration solution for Jira to Jira, and as you know, in Jira everything is an issue. Yeah. Now, when we introduced Exalate for ServiceNow, we had this thing that ServiceNow has so many different entity types, like request item, release, and so on. Or on Salesforce, we have case, we have all these different things. And so we couldn't keep on naming everything an issue, because that's not correct. And so you will find that you can use in the outgoing and incoming sync scripts, you can use things like case request item short description whenever you are synchronizing request items. Yeah? And to name all these different types, entity is a common name for all these different types. Yeah? And so your question, what's the difference between issue and entity? It's the same thing. Now, what's the difference between issue and replica? Replica is really the content of the replica is what will be sent from one side to the other side. And so you will copy these values from your local environment, from your local issue, into a replica and send that over. And that's really important to understand, because you will only include in replica the information that you want to share, right? So for instance, if you say, well, I got this secure information that I don't want to share, don't put it in replica. It will not be sent. Yeah. Okay, so that's the big difference between the two, between replica and issue. Can you please explain a bit more on the pricing plans? Maybe George, do you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. Exalate is an instance-based pricing model. So each instance would need a license, an Exalate license as well. Let's just read this question. And the pricing depends on the platforms you're integrating to. Please explain a bit more on the pricing plans. Yes, we have the basic plan. So as we mentioned, when you're configuring Exalate, you've got those three choices. So basic, visual, and the script mode. The script mode being the one with jumped into today. That basic mode, if you select that, that's your free plan. That's free forever. It's very quick and easy to set up. It's a matter of a few clicks, and then your systems are synced. And that's 1,000 free syncs, of course. The other pricing plans, so you've got the free one, and then you've got the premium plan, which is the visual and the script mode. I hope that answers your question. Please let me know in the chat, whoever asked that one, if that makes sense. And I'm going to drop my email in there, so if there's any further questions as well on pricing or licensing, then you'll be able to contact me directly. Anything else to add there, Francis?
No, thank you. Thank you, George.
Good.
Next question, when does a sync count? Is there a different condition? Does the sync count when all conditions are triggered and so on? So referring to the free plan, whenever we say, well, you have 1,000 syncs per month, we make a difference between a sync and an update. So a sync is really the Exalate operation. Whenever you form a twin between an issue and a ticket. So whenever you do an Exalate, you will create that twin itself. Yeah. And that's the Exalate itself. But then every change that you do on the twin, on one side or on the other side, it's just an update. It's not counted as a sync. Yeah? So whenever you look at the free plan, which allows up to 1,000 syncs per month, that's like that you Exalate 1,000 issues on a monthly basis. I hope that this is answering the question, because there's much more to it. But again, please clarify in the chat if necessary. Next question is on Jira local synchronization from one project to another, how to avoid the attached files being created twice. That's a really good one. So first of all, the local synchronization is can be between like a service desk project and a software project. And you could have one business requirement would be that whenever there's an attachment added to a ticket on the service desk side, that attachment also needs to appear on the issue on the software side. That's one, and that's something that you can do with the attachment sync example that I provided earlier. But if you want to limit that attachment sync, you can either not syncing any attachments, or you could use one of the list processing that Syed showed a moment ago to avoid the duplication itself. Yeah. So with this Groovy scripting, you can go very far in deciding what attachments should be synchronized and which not. Next question is, can you update standard and new customized fields? For example, if a new field is added in Zendesk to add tags, can ServiceNow, for example, update this new customized field? Of course, if you add new custom fields to on your Zendesk site, yeah, and you want to modify its value during a sync, you as a Zendesk administrator, you will have to change the incoming sync script on your site. So the ServiceNow organization will not have access to your environment. So whenever there's like a specific new business requirement to sync whatever custom field on the ServiceNow to a custom field on Zendesk, what normally happens is you have a kind of a conversation on this requirement, and then each of the two administrators will make the modification on either end. But the answer is a long way of saying yes, it's possible. Next question is, what happens when you print a variable from the class level? Will it throw an error or stringify the results? Yeah. So the question is, how can you troubleshoot errors? So one approach is what Syed showed, is using the debug.error statement, which will show an error in the UI. And that's easy when you develop a synchronization. But of course, You can also use the log object, the log.info, log.warn, or log.error to get messages into your log files. And that's really useful whenever you want to keep track of changes that have been done by Exalate itself. Yeah. So everything that's processed by the incoming sync script will then be logged into your logging system. Okay, those null exceptions are really helpful. Is the text default applicable to most systems, or is that specific to certain applications? So what I think this refers to what Syed was showing with the Elvis operator, where if value 1 is null, it will the expression will become a value 2. Yeah, and that's really used for setting default values. For instance, it could be that you say, well, if I don't find the target priority in the mood to priority type of synchronization, you could always say, well, in that case, it should always be low as a priority itself. Yeah, and so the question is default applicable for all applications, and the answer is it depends again to your system that you are implementing. Okay, next one. Is it reasonable to try and do a Jira project export using Exalate from Jira to Jira? Because there's no project export in Cloud Jira. Yeah, that's true. We would not advise using Exalate to do a project export. Exalate is really a synchronization solution. It's really meant to set up a synchronization between two issue trackers. There are project export add-ons available on the marketplace, which allow you to do that functionality. Yeah, but yeah, you could in the end, if you really want it, it would be possible. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, you're audible.
Okay, no, because I got a warning from my system. All right, next one is this one we had already. Is it possible to do test case test run? We clearly have to implement that feature, so it's currently not implemented. Yeah. So their next question is, having two Jira instances connected, how will Exalate trigger workflow transition on the other end? In Jira, workflow transitions are being used to change the status. For instance, if you change an issue from open to in progress, you would use a kind of transition, start work. Yeah. So what Exalate is providing you is a way to set a status. So for instance, if you say, well, I want to set a status to in progress of this issue, then Exalate will find out what transition, what shortest path will lead between the two statuses. So for instance, if you have to go through 3 different transitions, Exalate will ensure that these 3 transitions are being executed on the issue itself. What you see here is a kind of approach how you can do that status orchestration between 2 systems. On the outgoing sync, you would then say, well, the target issue status, you will put it in the replica. And on the incoming sync, you would say, well, if the remote issue is set in progress, then the local issue should be set in action. And then using this set status function on the issue, the status will be changed to in action itself. Of course, here is another example of the Elvis operator, where that if the status map doesn't resolve into a value, then the default status will be to do. Okay. So these are 2 examples in one thing. Then next question is, does the message only contain the data modified by the last change on the source side, or always all fields? The answer is all fields. So everything that you put in the outgoing sync will be sent over for each sync transaction. And that's really important because it simplifies the incoming sync specification. If it would only contain the things that changed, that can become really complex complex coding. But to accommodate certain use cases, there's also the previous object. So you have the replica and a previous object. And the previous object can be used to see what values have been changed between the previous message and this message. Yeah? So there's quite a bit of examples on the documentation side for that. Okay, next question. Can I modify the connection if I'm not an administrator of the task tracking system? Well, the thing is, if you're not administrator on a task tracking system, then Exalate has a lot of power. You can do so much with Exalate that being an administrator is almost a must, because you want to avoid that someone can really make modifications that you're not aware of, right? And so that's why the administrator role is being enforced. Yeah? There's also in the security white paper a whole explanation why being an administrator is really mandatory. Yeah? It doesn't mean that the proxy user, which is the user which makes the modifications on the issue, needs to be an administrator, but the person who is doing the configuration needs to have system administration permissions. All right, next one. It's possible to define only one proxy user. If you have multiple connections, how do you ensure that wrong data is not through connection? So here's an example of an outgoing sync processor where, well, there's a mistake, where, for instance, you say, well, I don't want to send secret information. So in that case, yeah, if you return in the outgoing sync script, just at the beginning, without modifying the replica, no sync transaction will be sent. So what you normally do, and that's a good practice, is to validate all your assumptions at the beginning of your outgoing sync. Is it secret? Is it not too big? Is it asserting all your conditions? Then the sync transaction can happen. If one of these conditions are not met, just return and nothing will be sent. Then next one, are changes to Exalate in ServiceNow tracked in update sets so able to be migrated to other environments? So this is ServiceNow lingo. Update sets are really meant to install customizations and applications on the ServiceNow environment. So that's now how Exalate works. Exalate is an external application which will interact with ServiceNow using REST APIs. Yeah, the only you will find on the ServiceNow store the Bridge app, which is like a small update set allowing to make it more easy to access the Exalate environment from the ServiceNow environment. Yeah, so to answer the question on the slide is whenever there's a change on the ServiceNow image, yeah, which is deployed either on Exalate Cloud or on premise, that will be announced through the release history, and we can provide you the link to the release history also later on. Yeah. Next question. We're now syncing between ServiceNow and Jira using another product. Fine. We have a database to record the sync pairs, so a ticket in Snow is not duplicated in Jira. If we turn to Exalate, it's a way that Exalate will respect the sync pair database, so Exalate will continue to sync, if not in the database and not sync. Okay. A lot of words. It just boils down, is it possible to migrate between another synchronization solution and Exalate? And the answer is yes. So Exalate has what we call a feature which we call bulk connect, which takes a really simple CSV file containing the local entity ID, like a system number, and the remote entity ID, like an issue key. Yeah, just create a CSV file containing these two, and then run a bulk connect. Yeah, and then from that moment, it is as if you have been using Exalate forever. Yeah. Now, there's one caveat again. we had this case that someone migrated from MuleSoft to Exalate, and they forgot to disable the MuleSoft integration, and that created a lot of problems because the information was duplicated all the time, and they were looking at Exalate, and we had to find out that they forgot to disable MuleSoft. Yeah, but okay, so again there. You have to be careful whenever you do this type of migrations, how you go for it. Yeah. Again, 130 partners that can help you out on this type of projects. Do you have any recorded sessions similar to this, but for GitHub issues? Salesforce case to GitHub. Okay. So again, that's this question about integrating Salesforce with GitHub. It raised a question on the community side, or ask to set up a demo session, and we can clearly help you out there. And yeah, maybe Manush, that might be a good other workshop in the future. So next question is, our organization already has Jira. Are you saying that we would just do the configuration from Jira? What about the cost? And we also have ServiceNow, which is, I don't understand the question. So again, please reach out to clarify the question itself. George can then redirect as necessary. All right. Next question, if you have a trigger for sync to be established by the reporter field. Okay, yeah. So the question there is, whenever you have a trigger which will bring an issue under sync, the question is if that condition would change, like the reporter is changed, would that break the synchronization? And the answer is no. Yeah. So the trigger is really meant to create a twin between two entities. Yeah. But once that they are under sync, all the changes can be synchronized. Yeah, according to your synchronization configuration. Do you guys have a list of nomenclature for different systems? We're trying. There's on the documentation side, there's already quite a bit of a nomenclature between the different issue trackers, and also in the security white paper, there's a thesaurus of terms that we are using. Okay, so this question is about how is status being handled. There was another question about statuses. There's an example. So it's an interesting exercise to look at how to synchronize statuses, because this goes into workflow orchestration. You have two different workflows, and you want to be sure that whenever something happens on one side, it's reflected on the other side and the way back. So the typical example is you have like a ticket which goes from waiting for support, waiting for development to resolved. Yeah, and whenever it's waiting for development, the issue gets escalated to the software project. And once that product issue has been resolved, that triggers a transition on the ticket from waiting for development to resolve itself. Yeah, and setting up such an orchestration can become really complicated. Like, what do you do when a product issue is reopened? Yeah? And again, there our partners are really good at helping out to implement these complex use cases. Next question: how can I use the defined value from Jira field configuration? How to an explicit value list? Okay, yeah. So that was a question that we expected. This is about the second exercise that Syed demonstrated, where he had like an array of accepted products. Yeah. So that array can be built dynamically based on the values that are linked to that custom field. There's an example on the documentation side how you can do that in Jira. Building that for other platforms, that's also possible. Yeah. So I would say that we will send you the link of the documentation later on. Is that the last question? 33? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for listening in.
Nice. Yeah, I'm really pleased we managed to get through quite a lot of them. So thanks, Francis. That was really interesting. I hope everyone's had their questions answered. We've put quite a few links in the chat of ways you guys can get in touch with us. But perhaps we'll just add one more. I know we've gone a bit over time as well. So thank you all for staying and working through that with us. It's been really nice to meet you all. So yeah, thank you very much. And if Francis, if you haven't got anything else to add, I think we can wrap it up here.
I think we're done. Thank you.
All right, enjoy your evening, your day, or your morning. And yeah, thank you all very much, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.